What's the creepiest display of intelligence you've seen by another human?
A friend once showed me his guidebook to how to handle his girlfriend. He'd taken notes on her likes and dislikes, what he'd given her and precisely how she responded, which actions caused which responses in her, what phrases he could quote at her to yield particular responses, etc., and then sort of used the information he'd collected to write a little guide to expected outcomes of various things he does, so that he could defuse her if she got mad at him. If she felt unloved, he had strategies for fixing the situation, so he could go back to doing whatever he likes while she gets off his back. If X, then Y will likely do Z, unless P. It was somewhere between oddly sweet and creepily manipulative. Edit, this comment is fascinatingly polarizing. I've skimmed through the replies and the reference to TV show characters aside, a bunch of people are saying some variation of, how is this even creepy, we all do this to some extent, while a bunch of others are saying he's a straight-up psychopath.
In real life? My sister, hands down, and it's an ongoing thing. You remember that scene in The Matrix, where Carrie and Moss downloads helicopter flight knowledge into her brain? Watching my sister just go about her daily life is like a never-ending loop of that scene. Dishwasher is broken? 10 literal minutes of YouTube later, she's got it figured out. The what, the how, the why, and it'll be fixed in half an hour if the parts are in stock at Lowe's. Car making a funny noise? Get her on FaceTime, pop the hood, crank the engine, and she's got it located and ID'd, and estimates from 3 local shops for you to pick from. Random archaeological discovery mentioned in passing on the daily MSN headlines. She read the journal article already, and isn't it interesting how that validates So-and-so's findings from his dig in Chile in the 80s? Bitch, since when do you know about fossils? Crazy complicated super esoteric recipe from Thailand she's never tried? I'll bet you $1,000 she'll glance at the recipe twice and whip out a version you could sell in a restaurant. She remembers your coworker's sister's boyfriend's birthday and that he really likes chocolate sprinkles, but not rainbow. She can get a feral dog eating out of her hand and get it to let her give it a bath, and diagnose what's wrong with its back leg from 10 paces away. Hey sis, do you happen to know anything about welding? How to preserve this old dress I found in great-grandma's attic? What I should do about these weird bugs on my tomato plants? Of course you do. Her bosses at work keep trying to move her up the chain, but she's not interested, because it'll cut into her jam-making time or something. But they all come to her first when there's a question or a problem they can't fix, and they listen on the first go. Her husband says he's seen her ask the general manager what flavor of stupid he ate for breakfast this morning, and seen him apologize for the error in judgment. She'll tell you she's not that smart, she just has a good memory, but I don't know, man. It's terribly handy to have her on my side, but if she ever decides to take over the world, we're all screwed.
I worked with someone briefly when I worked for the police. He came to my team to get frontline experience for promotion. He'd been in a secretive investigation unit before coming to us. I'll call him Dave. We went into this area with loads of gang-on-gang violence, and we were enforcing a Section 60 stop for weapons after a nasty murder in the area. We stopped 2 men at the side of the street and it was immediately obvious they had nothing to do with any of it. We chatted for a bit and that was it, or so I thought. Dave, being incredibly polite and friendly, said to one of the men, "I think I know you." The man said that he didn't. He'd never been in trouble with the police, never been arrested, never gets in any bother whatsoever. He was in his 30s, this fella. Dave said, "I do know you. Let me have a look at you." The man was good-natured about it even though I was feeling bloody awkward. "I've never been in any trouble," said the man. Dave looked at him and said, "I believe you haven't. Your dad did though." He calls the man by his name, his date of birth, his old address, his mom's name and date of birth, and his dad's details too. Dave says that 22 years previously he'd attended at the bloke's house when he was a preteen because his parents were arguing and his dad was drunk. His dad was arrested for a minor sleep-it-off breach of the peace. He wasn't a regular criminal or anything like that. Dave had not only recognized the guy, but he'd done it from when he was a child, aged him, and remembered every bloody detail for a minor thing over 20 years previous. No wonder he was in the high-end investigation units. Genius.
Not creepy, but I knew a 14 years old who was helping his dad drywall a home. The kid looked at the shape of a staircase, looked at the drywall on the horses ready to cut, looked back at the staircase, then cut the drywall without a single measurement or marking. The drywall fit the staircase so perfectly it slid into place like it was snuggling the stairs. Not a single measurement.
When I was in med school, I was tangentially friends with a guy who never showed up to uni at all. Skipped all lectures, called in sick for all lab and tutorial sessions. The night before second-year finals he was around my house and said he had spent the last week watching every lecture at 2x speed. Dude placed top 10 out of 300 students in every exam. And mind you, it wasn't just he remembered everything, but he had a functional, lateral applicable knowledge of all the stuff we had to know, much better than most people who actually showed up. I always shuddered to think that if he applied himself he would be a monster of a man, but dude was content to just chill.
I went to university with someone like this. Everyone thought he was a bit of a dick. He was actually just really intelligent, so I think much of life just bored him. He needed the stimulation. I actually got on okay with him. The two things I remember. First, his insane ability at pool. He just could figure out the angles for multiple balls and bounces and had the skill to hit the shot to cause what he could forecast. Secondly, 1 week before our end-of-year exams he confessed that he had been to about 5 lectures that year and had never read any of the books or materials. He just said, "I suppose I had better read some." He then spent a week in his room reading. He passed with the equivalent of a first. No idea what happened to him.
I knew a lady who counted pills in a pharmacy basically her entire life. One time she looked at a container of ibuprofen that was supposed to have 100 pills in it and said it looked off. She recounted and it had 99 pills in it. One less. My mind was blown.
I had to learn collegiate-level German in the military, which was a 9-month class. We started off with 15 people and graduated with 6. It was really hard and I barely made it through. The top kid in my class was basic white kid from Indiana, who had already tested out with top scores in Spanish and Portuguese in a matter of weeks. He not only knew those languages perfectly fluently, he could switch dialects fluently between like the DR and Spain, or Brazil and Portugal. His story was the schools were scheduled for a specific length of time, with a report date already set that was kind of far out, so the Defense Language Institute, our school, kept throwing languages at him. He figured that out and started taking his time in class, but like halfway through German he turned in a science fiction book that he had written to our teachers, completely in German language. Then they put him in Arabic, then Farsi, which were each 1.5-year-long schools on their own. So in the 9 months I was there to learn how to read, write, and speak German, which already had an expected high failure rate. He did the same for Spanish, Portuguese, German, Arabic, and Farsi, including different dialects, accents, wrote a couple books. Before he came he said he knew some Spanish from working construction after high school and liked the idea of becoming a linguist, but had never tried actually learning before. Besides languages, he seemed extremely normal, but no one knew he was writing books. We already had like 4 hours of homework every night. It was insane. Edit to add, we were friends, and I asked him his method. He said his favorite way to learn was to take songs he knew in English and then translate them into the new language. The trick was he wouldn't translate it word for word, he would learn about the people and say the lyrics, how they would say it. How he figured that out I have no idea.
Just the first time I witnessed someone with a special interest in real life. Was a school assistant and had been asked to walk around outside the school with a specific 13-year-old kid, who needed a 10-minute stress relief break. It was a school for kids with anxiety and depression. Anyway, we are walking, and a plane goes by overhead pretty low to the ground. In a super casual tone of voice that kid starts telling me the heading of the plane, which airport it came out of based on how low it was, and its probable flight number and destination. I was in shock.
Not exactly creepy, but I had a friend who failed maths at school. When presented with a selection of alcoholic drinks, even with hundreds of types, he could instantly work out the alcohol content, volume and price to determine which would get him drunk the fastest.
I had a friend from childhood who had an eidetic memory. He never forgets anything. At primary school, he had a lot of problems because he couldn't accept that people forgot stuff and nobody had any idea that he had this ability. So if anyone got a detail wrong or something like that, he would think they were lying / trying to trick him and freak out. Wasn't until he was 15 or so that people realized what was going on.
I knew a guy who could remember everything he ever read, but that's not the creepy part. Creepy part was how he wouldn't tell you. So he didn't like telling people because it becomes a game for people. What is the fifth word of the second paragraph on page 93 for this book? So anyway, anyone knew, he just wouldn't tell them, fair, up until they pissed him off. Then it was like a court drama. On January 16, 2007 you said that John and Jane were seen flirting at the coffee shop and, quote, OMG John is cheating on Mary with Jane again. Look through past messages and sure as shit the message would say that. Anyway, dude was super smart but really jaded and depressed. Fell out of touch, so I don't know what he's doing now.
Shortly before my ex-wife and I separated, she stated that she had ran all of my friends and family away from me intentionally over the years. Not because she hated them, but because if the day came where she decided to kill me, she would have time to dispose of my body and leave the country before, or if they noticed I was missing. By that point I hadn't talked to any of my friends or family for almost a year and a half, so they wouldn't have known for a good while thinking I was still just ignoring them because of her.
What? That's creepy as F. Hopefully you're very far away from her and have reconnected with everyone. And told them what she said. You know, in case you go missing.
We've been divorced for 3 years, I have full custody of our 3 girls and she's currently in a mental health facility. I didn't know it in the dating stages, but she had a mental illness and was diagnosed professionally with schizophrenia about 2 years before our divorce. I don't blame her for all of her actions or anything. I knew she was a sweet, kind-hearted person when we met, but her mental health declined rapidly after having each kid. The PPD really ramped it up and it just became too much for her. We did divorce and I did get full custody of our daughters.
My ex remotely took over the computers of 7 people using the same Wi-Fi and was able to make it look like the illegal images he was looking at were never on his computer. We lived in a duplex and they let us use their Wi-Fi. It wasn't until years later I realized what he had done. Sometime before this, I had come home and walked into our room to find him in the computer of one of the neighbors on his computer. I saw a network map of all the computers in both houses. I confronted him and he gaslighted me into believing I had not seen what I thought. Some years later, I stumbled upon a GIF on a shared tablet. It was shot in our very distinct bathroom and showed my 14-year-old niece nude. I called police immediately and he never came home again. He is currently in prison. That night he was staying at his parents'. Police were investigating. I realized his Gmail was logged in on another tablet we shared. I could see his search history in real time. When does CP become a federal offense? Can a not convicted SO see their kids? What's prison like in Virginia? Daddy going to jail? How do I get my wife to come back to me? Can you plead the fifth at custody court, etc.? I've always found it extremely unnerving that he could be so tech-savvy on one side of things, and so careless on the other.
I hang around some shady people. The one that took it for me was a hardcore addict, with multiple chemical compounds around his house, he had no business having. He said, he made them all himself, I know my chemistry, and they were all legit what they were labeled, as he described how he made them, and it checked out. I've come to a point in my life, where my philosophy is, never to underestimate a drug addict. I've seen people at the bottom, who are more intelligent in one or two things, then I'd anticipate 90% of the global population.
I once watched my cousin with Down syndrome just start hitting golf balls at the range like he was the course pro. He went to a few of my matches growing up, and occasionally I would take him to the range with me because he loved watching me hit them and riding in the cart if I played. One day he was messing with one of my wedges and I offered him a couple balls. By no means was he sending these hundreds of yards, considering it's a pitching wedge, but every shot was practically identical to the one before. He was consistently hitting them 80 yards within what seemed like a 5-yard grouping. Since then I've tried to get him to hit more balls, but he just doesn't want to. By far the most unexpected thing I've witnessed.
Maybe not creepy in a conventional way, but blew my mind and convinced me he was a cyborg. I found myself working on intelligence while I was deployed to Afghanistan. New world to me, never trained or worked in the field. I was an infantryman. I was the NCOIC, non-commissioned officer in charge, and worked with the OIC, officer in charge, Mike. Mike had this unnatural ability to recall random, obscure intelligence reports from months back. For example, say we got an immediate release report saying there was going to be some weapons and ammunition smuggled into our area. He could instantly recall several reports from way back that connected to the new report. No lie, his genius was so deep, it happened many times and led to many successful operations. The best part? Every single man and woman in our unit came home alive, and that was due in very large part to his supernatural ability. I just feel lucky to have been involved and insanely proud and honored to be a part of that team with him. Even if I always felt like a kid trying to play at the grown-ups table.
I used to know someone who would be pretty quiet around people he didn't know, only give info when asked and half of it. I took it as guarded until I got really close to him. What piqued my interest was when he said, "I don't like her. She's scary smart, but plays dumb." I dislike scary smart people like that. It's because he used to be manipulative when he was younger, and admitted it while saying, "I'm not like that anymore." I noticed he was always watching and reading people. He'd know who you can tell things to, and who you can't. He knows who has dated who, and would read people's mannerisms. He would say things like he had trauma as a kid, that's why I was nice to him. He fake laughs after saying something, even if it's repeating what you say. It's as if he is trying to start laughter because he doesn't know how to make people genuinely laugh, but wants them to, and doesn't know how to do that other than being funny or charismatic, and even unnecessary compliments like a personal hype guy. Common approval-seeking traits for children who had bad family lives. That's why he talked to you about foster care, because he was probably in the system. And yeah, that dude was in the system. Called out so quickly. Your stepmom probably wants to run the family instead of your dad because your dad works and she doesn't, and he doesn't want to constantly rein in the kids and grandkids. She wants some semblance of control because she doesn't work. She's a busybody with nothing to do but watch the news and send emails and texts all day. That's why she's judgmental, because she knows it's false control, but it's all she has. That was the best way to put my stepmom, a person he never met. Because she's annoying ASF, and he only knew such a small amount of details about her because of what I had said to him. And he says this shit like it's common knowledge, while drinking, as if it's all monotonous to him. Scares me to think about how he used to be manipulative.
I used to go to school with a genius dude. He was super shy and introverted, but his ability to solve complex issues had everyone ask for his help, and he eventually became a super quiet leader in our classroom. He would correct teachers left and right, score perfect grades while everyone else was struggling. He photocopied his extremely clean notebook for everyone to use, solved the tests multiple times in multiple variations with errors, and passed it along the class for everyone to copy. Did a few people's final project for a fee in addition to his own. He carried us all through the toughest classes, all while staying extremely humble about his intellectual skills. Finished every semester with near-perfect grades. We all looked up to him.
I used to drag race. One of my racing buddies is a mechanical engineer. We were at the track one day, pitted together with our cars, and were discussing gear ratios and whatnot. I was running 36-inch tall rear tires and the car was going through the traps, finish line, at about 6,200 RPM in the 1/8 mile, at 148 miles per hour. Peak power for my engine at the time was 7,100 RPM. The idea is to get the car into the 7,100 RPM range quicker and for longer periods of time, which will make the car faster on the top end, and having more gear in it means the car would leave harder too. So I'm thinking about this and said, I wonder how many times these tires rotate when the car makes a clean 1/8 mile pass. Within 10 seconds, he said, 70¼ revolutions. I'm like bruh. And walked into the trailer to get my calculator. So I calculated. Rollout, a 36-inch tall tire will move forward 113.04 inches on a full rotation, 36 by 3.14. Convert that to feet gives you 9.42 feet, 113.04 divided by 12. Divide the length of the track by the rollout, 660 divided by 9.42, and you get 70.06. None of this is advanced math. But dude did it in his head in about 10 seconds. We've got apps to do this stuff nowadays. But it was an impressive thing to see happen.
My cousin is some kind of genius. Like the kind of genius that doesn't know how to interact with humans. During a family dinner, the kids were sat at the kids' table. We were all talking about kid stuff, games, TV shows, drama at school, sports, teasing each other. Someone decided to go around the table and everyone shows their favorite video on the internet. Stuff like Vines, Reels, Shorts, etc. This dude gets his phone out and puts an hour-long brain surgery video. In the middle of us eating lamb curry. A bunch of the younger kids start retching and crying and stuff, and he stops the video but starts reciting the whole procedure, that was wrong and what should have been done. All of it. Keep in mind, he was around 11 years old. The parents come to see what's wrong, and they are just so stunned they can't stop him. An uncle, who was a surgeon, later told that everything he said was technically right, but was still under research and not practiced yet. So no one knows how he knew all that, but my younger brother still doesn't eat lamb.
I was a kid in the 80s, and my dad's best friend who worked with him came over and saw me messing around with my Commodore 64. I showed him I was working on coding it to draw a line in BASIC. This was all new and I was excited at the time. How technology has changed. And he goes, let me make a couple adjustments on the math, and sits down and in a few lines codes out a Mandelbrot fractal that grows and expands with overlapping fractals on my 16-color EGA monitor. This was years before I'd see something similar with Windows Line Screensaver. I know fractals are somewhat straightforward for those that know the math, but to be able to sit down out of the blue and do this in a few minutes required a level of skills and knowledge that blow me away, especially done as a one-off for a kid. It really inspired me. He was also the one that told me that the reason we haven't found extraterrestrial life is because of time, not space, like putting a person in New York and Florida and giving them 5 minutes to find each other. He spent his later years consulting for Apple, basically doing what he liked working on, and now is retired and long-haired, playing bass and guitar in lounges most evenings.